You know that sensation you can notice when someone whispers directly into your ear? That scintillating, pleasurable, sensuous shimmering of static-like tingling that seems to spread softly down your spine. Well, welcome to the WEIRDNET. ASMR as an experience seems to have been around since the beginning of our existence as beings with a nervous system, but there appears to have been very little attention paid to it for the majority of that time. It's something we've almost all experienced at some point, and although the stimuli differs from person to person, seems to be primarily triggered by acts of personal attention. Whether it be someone whispering to you intimately or just having your hair cut, there seems to be a fairly universal tendency for this sensation to arise when we're subjected to certain non-haptic stimulation. It isn't unusual or rare. If anything, it seems fairly universal, with only the triggers and the intensity of the experience varying for each person. Some feel themselves to be caressed by a low-grade euphoria, while others experience a sense of deep satisfaction, occasionally described as being similar to the flow state, or what some refer to as stimming. There are parallels with other sensations from our sensory palette, such as frisson or goosebumps, as well as a negative expression known as misophonia, where an individual experiences extreme discomfort from even quiet sounds, such as someone eating or the tapping of feet. It's generally agreed that what we now call ASMR began its rise to prominence in October of 2007 on the Steady Health forums. A user going by the name of OKWhatever51838 started a thread called Weird Sensation Feels Good, where he described a pleasurable sensation he experienced, seemingly at random, but always when he was being touched or touching himself. You at the back, behave yourself. Anyway, this went on to spark a conversation where people from all over the world confirmed that they too had experienced this weird sensation, which did indeed feels good. The thread appears to have been the catalyst for the formation of various online communities who shared a fascination with these sensuous sensations and who would take the topic from a small group of dedicated researchers to a worldwide sensation. No pun intended. Okay, pun intended, it's been a long time since I wrote a script. Anyway, over the course of the next 3 years, groups such as the Society of Sensationalists would host discussion and publish their own research into the unnamed feeling. That feeling they'd all been investigating and describing for the last few years didn't even have a name until 2010, when a lady called Jennifer Allen coined the phrase ASMR, subsequently creating a Facebook page which would become a major base for all future research and discussion. The acronym stood for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, which, Allen felt, adequately described the experience and gave it a more acceptable, more scientific vibe than some of the other names they had bandied around, for example, head orgasms or brain tingles. Taking away any potentially sexual connotations would also allow more people to discuss it, rather than hiding it away as though it were some form of kink they should be ashamed of. In actuality, only around 5% of ASMR fans claim to experience any sexual pleasure from it, while the vast majority consider it to be therapeutic. For most people, ASMR is associated with sounds such as someone whispering into your ear or the sound of someone brushing their teeth, but it can be triggered through all of the sense doors depending on the individual. For example, some have cited unlikely stimuli, such as the late great Bob Ross, whose soft-spoken, gentle voice and equally gentle painting style provides many with a sense of relaxation and calm. Others describe how watching videos of things like seeing soap being cut into perfect shapes brings about the same deep satisfaction and pleasure. In the case of audio stimuli, there exist thousands of videos and YouTube channels dedicated to providing ASMR content, whether it's eating a carrot in front of the microphone or leafing through a newspaper at close range. Auditory ASMR seems to be one of the most popular aspects of the entire phenomena, with channels clocking up millions of views over videos offering everything from the sound of scissors to simulated experiences of being in a hairdresser's via videos. There exists a plethora of satisfying videos where someone prepares or destroys something in a very precise, attempted fashion, whether it be slicing up soap or arranging a table. This attention to detail appears to be key in triggering ASMR, as it's also triggered in acts of one-on-one grooming where someone pays close, personal attention to you. Given that we are primarily a visual species, it makes sense that visual representations of detailed, mindful activities would trigger the same series of sensations within us, and so it is that we see so many videos on the subject of ASMR. Tactile sensations seem to be discussed a little less often than auditory or visual stimuli, aside from the basic processes of having someone pay attention to you in a caring manner or stroke your skin softly. As we'll see, there's something of an aversion towards the sexualization of ASMR within the community, so perhaps this also plays a role in there being less attention paid to physical triggers than to non-haptic stimuli. As we can see, the range of potential triggers is not limited to any one sense door, even though we see far more attention paid to the auditory and visual stimuli online. Regardless of the trigger though, the same basic pattern of sensations seems to be described by those who experience it. Being an entirely subjective experience, however, is proven to be a difficult phenomena to study under scientific conditions and thus hard to properly research. What little hard research does exist suggests that ASMR comes to us through evolutionary experience of one-on-one grooming within our family or pack, which makes sense given the way that having such direct, personal attention, a bonding and unifying experience between two beings, can trigger such a deep, satisfying feeling. As everyone knows, Rule 34 is a fact of life on the internet. If it exists, there'll be porn of it, and so the therapeutic world of ASMR would also give birth to its own erotic offshoot, much to the disappointment of many within the community. Erotic ASMR is basically a modern version of the old-fashioned sex line, but with more emphasis on the sounds than the descriptions. Its very existence angered many who felt that it cheapened the experience and brought it into disrepute in the public gaze, especially when they'd worked so hard to find a totally not sexual name for something that's often verging on sexual just by being so intimate and intense. Alas, Rule 34 exists, and so an anti-erotic ASMR group would spring up in response and attempt to steer conversation back to the more clinical, therapeutic applications of ASMR, rather than having some weird guy in his basement masturbating to the sound of some girl shitting or whatever. Aside from the internal disputes, ASMR is still considered by many to be quackery and unscientific. Even though people report benefits ranging from the easing of chronic pain to simply helping them to sleep, there has been very little serious research into the subject, and so it remains something of a fringe area. It wouldn't be unfair to refer to it as a primarily recreational thing rather than any sort of scientifically validated method of therapy, but that's something we may see change in coming years. If indeed ASMR offers a method to lessen the suffering of any individual without any side effects or harm to anyone else, then we may see further studies to confirm or refute its efficacy, but until then it remains something of a controversy as a therapeutic method. Is it real? Well, and not to go all Jordan Peterson or anything, but it depends on what you mean by real. It seems to be a commonly experienced pattern of sensations which can be reliably triggered by specific stimuli, and which basic fMRI scanning has confirmed to be related to one-on-one grooming throughout evolution. So yes, it's certainly real in the sense that it's explainable and replicable, but whether or not it holds any potential for use within a clinical setting remains under debate. It may be that it's simply a sort of evolutionary leftover, a redundant trigger that still exists within our nervous system, just like the hibernation mechanism. As we've said, being entirely subjective, ASMR is a difficult thing to research, but as we've seen, there appears to be an evolutionary basis for its existence. From our ancestors picking the nits off of one another, to the modern hairdresser inevitably asking you about your holidays, it seems that we're hardwired to experience this strange, pleasurable, shimmering sensation when someone pays close attention to us. Currently, there are studies looking further into the mechanisms involved, but there's been very little research into more practical applications beyond anecdotal evidence in the ASMR groups themselves. Again, this might change in coming years, but for the moment, we can at least acknowledge that yes, ASMR is a thing, and yes, it's actually rather good fun. ASMR isn't something I'm all that into myself, to be honest, but it's certainly an interesting subject to look at. Obviously, this video is only an overview of an increasingly large territory, so I've only really skimmed the basics, and I would encourage anybody interested to do their own research. While I don't consider ASMR to be weird in that WEIRDNET sense, it's interesting more how it came to prominence organically via the internet and is now beginning to be noticed by a more mainstream audience. The way in which the ASMR community has developed, spread and popularised what is genuinely an archaic, deeply ingrained response to stimuli is fascinating, and I can't think of anything else like it. It was born and raised online, eventually becoming a collaborative research project which walked its own line outside of academia. It's brought attention to an incredibly primitive mechanism within human experience, and that, for me at least, sparks ideas that other such mechanisms are actually available. As I mentioned earlier, human beings still possess the ability to go into hibernation states, and there are practices within certain traditions of Buddhism that train you, for example, to control body temperature to a tremendous degree. This is a practice of Tumo. It's also partly what Wim Hof utilises in his own experiments. It's complicated, but it boils down to taking reflexive control over previously unconscious mechanisms within your own nervous system. And while this is a rather extreme example, it speaks to the fact that we do still have access to these really ancient triggers and can potentially use them to improve life for ourselves and for others. But anyway, I digress as usual. ASMR exists as a thing. It's got a huge audience, lots of creators and all sorts of offshoots and specialist areas depending on your preference. To think that this all arose from a single forum post for 2007 is insane, but those are the facts, and even though it was probably discussed elsewhere prior to this, it goes to show how powerful something as simple as a bare sensation can be. We're in a world where we're assaulted by information 24/7, so being able to filter everything out and access a blissful oasis of tingling euphoria, even for only a few seconds, could be a blessing. Thanks for watching and or listening. Please click the like button and comment below if you've enjoyed the video. If you would like to support my work with the WEIRDNET and allow me to make more videos more frequently, then please consider donating via PayPal, Patreon or Subscribestar via the links below. Take care of yourselves. Thanks once again for watching the WEIRDNET.